heard me, you didn't see the slides here, but we're going to go ahead and do the use case where we're going to reverse engineer a SQL Server database. We're going to go ahead and document that database a little bit, and then we're going to go ahead and forward engineer that to Synapse. So as you can see, hopefully on your screen now, you can see I'm in Data Architect. This is version 19 of Data Architect. It didn't version 18.5 of Data Architect and beyond has the new ribbon bar. So if you're using a version before that, it may look a bit different to you. But the rest of the application is pretty much the same in terms of layout. You have the same panes. You have the model object tree pane here. You have your diagram pane for the model diagrams. You have your data dictionary tab, your data lineage tab, and your macros tab. It's the same as it's ever been. So the first thing I want to do today is to start reverse engineering from our SQL Server. So I'm going to do a file new here, and I'm going to choose reverse engineer an existing database and go ahead and log in there. I'm going to choose SQL Server.
No problem, Tim. So within your studio, we can reverse engineer from quite a wide variety of different sources. So there's the main SQL platforms that you'd expect, such as SQL Server, Oracle, DB2, Sybase, and also more recently we've added things such as NoSQL sources like MongoDB. And of course, we'll continue to enhance that list of supported platforms and make that available as we enhance the product.
Oh, there we go. Okay, good. Thank God. For those of you that have given demos in the audience, I swear I am sweating bullets right now. So here we go, our regularly scheduled demo. So you can see we've started our reverse engineer wizard. We've gone ahead and connected to that SQL Server database. Not sure why it was taking so long. We're going to go ahead and get this training database out here. This was the target of our use case. For those of you that haven't run the reverse engineer wizard here, you can pick which objects that you want to select by including them here. We're just going to do the user tables today. You saw me pick training DB in the database list. I'm going to go ahead and use the DBO owner. If you wanted to download a different schema or a different owner there, you could select it. I'm going to go ahead and hit next here. You can see in the next page of our wizard here, it's already, since I said those user tables, it selected those user tables here. Had we selected any of the other objects on the previous page, those tabs would be highlighted and you could select within those object types whichever objects you wanted to actually bring back in your reverse engineer. Moving forward, if we wanted to and needed to, we could infer primary and foreign keys using some intelligence, some AI that the Data Architect has built into it by matching names and what have you from the physical database. We could also infer domains if we were going to do this. Our previous webinar we gave about a month ago now, I showed you that feature. You can also select here what kind of layout you want the initial layout to be. Orthogonal is going to be okay. And we're going to go ahead and hit next here. It's a relational model. If we had to apply naming standards, we could do that here on the way in. I'm going to show you that manually just so you get a better sense of how to do that as we flesh out our model. Of course, we're going against a Microsoft SQL Server. I already knew that. It's telling you that there, and it's telling you the summary of objects. Down here, if this was something you were going to repeat a few times, it might be good to save these previous settings into a quick launch file so you could reference that on page 1 of this engineer. I'm going to go ahead and hit finish here and let it go out to SQL Server. You can see now on your screens that it's gone out. It's extracting that table information in this dialog. It says reverse engineering has completed. So now you can see in our model object pane that we do have a logical and physical model created, both being called main model right now. So it's gone out and done that work for us. And again, the difference is, and why it does that, is because the physical model, it has all the characteristics, data types, and objects that would be associated with that individual platform. The logical model is platform agnostic, and one of the features and abilities of ER Studio Data Architect is that you can have many different physical models for a single logical model, and that's going to really aid us in terms of what we're trying to do today of porting this SQL Server database, the metadata and structure, over to a new platform, which is our Synapse. So we're going to do a little bit of work on the logical model here, just because we've got this model back from reverse engineered from production. I don't know a lot about it in our organization. It was sitting out there, a new team or new server, and we want to really document this so the team can understand this. Very first thing I want to do is I want to look here and go ahead and do some naming standards. I'm going to do a new naming standards template. I'm going to go through this quickly. It was in our previous webinar, but it's very important when we're doing reverse engineers from the physical to the logical to get that level of documentation where you need it to be. I'm going to go ahead and import this from a corporate naming standards template we already have. So you can see here in our mapping that we've already set some corporate naming standards out that will translate some of our physical names, ACT to account, and what have you. So I'm going to go ahead and say OK there. If I go back to my data model tab, I'm going to go ahead and run the naming standards utility on this. Again, got two tabs here. I'm going to select that corporate standard naming template here. I'm going to convert the names from physical to logical here. On the output tab, if I go ahead and do a right click and then select all at the logical level, and I run translation, you can see that what it's going to translate here, and I get these nice business level names for the objects. I'm going to go ahead and say OK, and you can see now in our logical model that those tables, those entities now have changed, and the entity names at the attribute name level to something much more readable and palatable at kind of a business user level, much more friendly. Going to go through this quickly too. Going to create a business data object. So business data objects are a way of grouping entities together in a complex model. This model in particular is not very complex, but I'm going to show you how business data objects can help you. You can create them new. I'll say I'll create one called skills here. And on our containment, I'm going to go ahead and pick those entities that have anything to do with skills and just say OK. If I say, of course, I can add a definition, a note, any security information, which we'll talk about in a minute, and any attachment bindings. I'm going to go ahead and say OK here, and you can see now that we've created this skills business data object. And the beauty of these is that now business users or modelers can collapse those to get a much better view of functional areas that are affected in your model. Now, these business data objects do not affect the underlying objects. In other words, that skill entity is still the same skill entity you would find up here in your entity list. It's just a way of graphically simplifying the diagram. And in this diagram, it might not be as important, but in some of your customer sites, you might have models with hundreds or even thousands of tables. We've seen that, and then functional areas such as finance or HR and that kind of stuff, where you could group these entities into these business data objects to have a much better conceptual view of what's going on in the database. The next thing I want to do here to help with the models is I'm going to create a submodel. Submodels are a lot like business data objects, except for submodels are actually separate model objects. They can be separately checked in and checked out of your repository. It allows in very, very complex models for just those functional areas or those groupings that you create in the submodel to be worked on. So I'm going to go ahead, like we did on the business data object, I'm going to create a skills submodel. I'm going to go ahead and move the skill stuff over, the entities here. Again, we can see which attributes. We have the same tabs here: definition, properties, attachment bindings, and security information. I'm going to say OK there, and now you can see in our model object tree that I have this skills submodel. This skills submodel has the same three entities that we put in our business data object, but this is a separate model now. It is important to know that if I go in and change this skill entity here in this submodel, it is reflected here on the skill entity in the main model. It is the same underlying object. So that's important to keep in mind. So it isn't actually adding new objects. It's just a grouping of objects to make maintenance and your visuals a little bit easier to consume. The next thing I want to do here is add some further information to our main model. I'm going to look at security and compliance. On our data dictionary tab down here, you can see that we have data security information. We have the ability to create attachments. And under data security, we have some compliance. Of course, you can see our naming standards there. I'm going to go ahead and create a new attachment type here really fast. We're just going to call this usage level as a way of identifying objects and what level they're used. I'm going to say I'm going to deselect all, and I'm going to say this is at the entity level, and say OK there. We have that usage level. I'm going to create a new attachment there and say this is an enterprise level. This is our enterprise level attachment. We could of course put a description in there. We could put any text in here. This is an enterprise entity. Say OK, and now we have that. We could go into, I'll just go ahead and show you. So if we go into our full-time employee table now, we have the ability to see those attachments and actually apply that attachment here. You have the text value here that you could change. I'm going to go ahead and say, yes, this is an enterprise entity. I'm going to say OK there. You're not going to quite see that yet because I have a little bit more work to do. I'm going to add some data security information around this. If you saw that, I did it very quickly. I generated the default security information here. It gave us these categories here for compliance and data security classification. Under compliance mapping, you can see that we have values that we could choose. It comes with this list of values. Some of them may be germane to your particular sites. I'm going to choose PII, personal information, as our default. Go ahead and check that as a default, and I'm going to bind that. I'm going to bind that to all our logical entities there and say OK. You still don't see it yet. Got a little bit more work to do. Going to go into our privacy level. We're going to edit that to show you. Again, you have for your security, you could choose. By the way, you can also add anything you want to this, unused or what have you, as your data security property. So that is a free format list. You can add to. I'm going to say internal use only is our default. I'm going to set that. I'm going to bind that again to our entities. So all this work is about fleshing out this logical model. So you could then take it to your team or business modelers and say, hey, this is what this database is working with here. This is the importance of this metadata, this data to our organization. I'm going to go ahead and look at security impact here. Same thing here. We can say what the security impact is, low, medium, high. Again, you could add your own values. I'll say high is our default here. Say okay, go to our binding information again. Let's bind that to our logical diagram. That's fine. So again, we go back, we're looking at our logical model here. I need to go in, this is important, that's why we pointed out in our diagram object display properties. You want to make sure if it has an attachment, we go ahead and show that. If it has data security, let's go ahead and show that in our model. If we stay okay here, you can see that now that this compliance mapping has shown up on all our entities, and this one entity that I said this is an enterprise level entity, our attachment is there. So you can see how we've started to flesh out this model to make it much more meaningful to the organization in terms of what the data means to us. So now we can, if you continued working like this, actually I'm going to open another file here. I think it's this one. So yes, so you can see here if this is the same model, done some work on it. This is the physical model. This starts to show you without having to do the work real time for you in this webinar, where you can get to. Kind of shows you business data objects again, as I created here. Any submodels we might have created, any other schema specific objects we might have created, sequences, schemas, users, and roles. You see those here, and have a view here, so you can see how you can really start to document this database out in terms of its metadata and it's important to the organization. So now that we have our logical model fleshed out as much as we need to, we have our physical model. Which is SQL Server. I'm gonna go ahead and do the next step in this webinar, which is we've got this. We like the structure. We understand it. It's important to our organization. Let's go ahead and port this to Synapse. So the first thing I'm going to do is off our logical. I'm going to do a generate physical model. That brings up the generate physical model dialog. I'll just call this Synapse for us here. It's going to be relational. The target platform is right here. Again, for those who haven't seen the other webinars, you have many different database platforms to choose from there. We're going to choose Microsoft Azure Analytics. Whether we want to validate, there's again is that quick launch, where at the end of this dialog on page 5, we could save these settings out as a quick launch and actually reference it there if we wanted to. Going to hit next here. It's showing you the objects again that we're going to put into our physical model for Synapse. We're fine with this selection. Going to go ahead again. We could apply a naming standard template if we wanted to. We could provide global prefixes or suffixes there. We're fine with the defaults. We're going to go ahead. Platform specific storage parameters. This page will change based upon your target database platform. In this case, we're not going to choose anything here. Get to page 5. What do you want to do with associative entities, many-to-manys? Do you want to create that associative entity? Do you want to create the tables without the relationship? Something choice a modeler has to make. Again, we're going to use Azure Synapse Analytics, and here's our quick launch save. We're going to go ahead and hit finish here, and our model object tree over here, you can see that we now have a Synapse. We have a Synapse physical model. With everything good to go there, the next thing we're going to do is go ahead and right click on that new physical model, and we're going to do our generate database option. The generate database option is kind of our last and most important step. You have a couple of choices to make here. You can generate a SQL script file. Most customers do this work this way. in order to create a script file that they then can put into the input to their DevOps or their change CCRB, change control review board, for any change control work that need to do to get this database created into a production server. In this case, we're going to go ahead and generate directly with a database connection. This might be used. I've seen it used in terms, like a dev area, development area, or you're porting things to a test area, and you can just quickly create it this way, where your change control rigor might be a little bit less formal. Again, your quick launch. I can look at our connection here. I want to connect. I'm going to use our, I want to use analytics here. We're going to use SQL Server authentication. You can see that, but it would use Azure Active Directory if you wanted to. I'm going to pull this out of my handy dandy little oh, sure. I'll show you that the specific properties here real fast. Maybe I'll go back to it. And let me get my connection name here real fast. Copy. And that's going to be my connection. And what are you saying, John, here? Maybe I should just go back and show that. What do you think right now? Yeah, I could restart this. Let's restart that.
Just
Sure,
up to
we've
you,
had
Tim. We just had a question come in just for everyone else, asking about, do we have support for specific indexing requirements and so on, and how that can affect the DDL. So I think Tim's just going to kind of bring up the editor for that and show what we have in there.
Yeah, I should have showed you that on the way in. You can see that in this model we do have some of those. We have sequences, we have a view, we have a schema, we have a function here. We could add those in our model. We could add those here off our physical model. Go ahead into the Synapse physical model here, and right here is where you would do that. Here's your functions. You could do a right click, add a new function here, name it, apply it to whatever schema you need it to. I'm not going to do that today, but you have this dialog. You can validate the SQL. You can put a description around the SQL you're putting in, any permissions or attachment bindings, and say OK there. The same, yes. The same with any procedures you want to create here. New procedure, and these would become objects in that physical model that when we did a generate Synapse database, they would come straight across with, right? So you can put your name in here, your schema again, your SQL for your procedure here, your stored procedure. I was trying to find the question real fast. That's why I was pausing, John. Let's see. Command apply. Did that answer the question, John? I'm not sure. There's a long list here.
I think the other thing that just might be worth doing, Tim, is if you just double click on one of the tables in the physical model.
Oh, sure.
And bring that up, and we'll just show things like the storage tab, just to show that it's got some specific options for Synapse.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Absolutely. Yeah. And those are the same on the generate database. You could set it globally for Synapse there too. Or if the table had certain file groups, you wanted to partition your tables into different file groups for storage, you can do that at the table level too.
And obviously on the DDL tab as well, the DDL that's
yes.
being kind of behind that is specific for the platform that you selected. So in this case, it's for the Synapse platform.
That's exactly right.
Thanks, Tim.
Schema we're using. Sure. I was unable to find that specific question in the list. So if we're okay with that, if there's not any other questions we can answer right now, and I'm not seeing any, John, I'll go ahead and do the generate database we started doing.
Yeah, go for that, and I'll just
Again,
pick up
that's
a couple of questions that are coming in, so that's no problem.
sure. So again, do the generate database. We're going to do it with a connection here. You can see the connection types here. We're going to do a direct connect using the Synapse Analytics drivers. I'm going to get my connection name again. Connection criteria is right there. Let's do a copy this time and not leave any characters off the end would be good, Tim. All right, and the username and password, that's pretty easy, admin user. And then password to not be read aloud. All right, let's see if that connection will work. We're gonna go ahead and hit next, and good. So it's made the connection. Again, it's an interesting thing with Azure Synapse too. It says select or create database. We're gonna check that. Um, what you'll need to do in Synapse is actually create the container already. I kind of wanted to briefly show that. If I jump to SQL Server Management Studio, I'm going to use this. You can see the icon there in SQL Server Management Studio that's showing you that's an analytics database. That database has to already be created. I was talking to our development group and said that's one of the idiosyncrasies with Synapse Analytics. That container has to already be created. So this is the one we'll be using. So I'm going to go ahead and say select or use an existing Synapse database. I'm going to choose that same database, ER Studio 19. We hit next here. Again, this is very familiar from our reverse engineering dialog. Same kind of thing here where we can select the objects and have some characteristics or choices around what we want to do with those objects. Anything we want to do with indices, users, roles, and schemas right across the top here. I will show you the SQL preview. So had we selected to generate this to a structured SQL file, you would get a file just like this. You can see right here that the SQL that this particular process is going to run for us is all right there and handy. You can also save this out as a file right there if you wanted to put that into get approval from your team, or if you can change control. I'm going to go ahead and hit next to continue with this dialog. We got a summary on page 4, again with the ability to create a quick launch settings. And I'm going to go ahead and hit finish here. So you can see it's gone out and it's talking to our Synapse container. We had a primary key constraint there, but it's generating our tables there. And we're complete. So we've done that completion. We had an error or two there that I hadn't seen before. If I go ahead and refresh this and open this, I should be able to see those tables when I go here, and there they are. So we've done that forward engineer. We probably did not select the right criteria on our foreign key and primary key index creation, or didn't give it a partition to put it in. But you can see that the forward generation has worked, the forward engineering has worked from our model, and so we've done very quickly with a few technical problems, all the way from the reverse engineer from SQL Server through our logical and physical model. Logical model was fleshed out to make it more meaningful to the organization, and then taking our physical model, worked with some of the physical characteristics and objects that are particular to that particular platform, and then done a forward engineer. So that is the entire circle that we wanted to or loop that we wanted to show you today.
So there's one other question there regarding the login details. Are you obliged to use the SA login? No, you're not. You do need some specific permissions, obviously, to be able to access the schemas, because Tim and I tend to work in demonstration environments. It's bad practice, but we tend to just use the SA login as it's convenient, so we get access to everything while we're doing the demonstrations and working through things. But as long as you've got an account which has got the relevant access rights to be able to get to the schema and create schemas and so on, you don't need to use the actual SA account. But if you do have further questions, you can always email into us using the contact form on the website, or I think it's info@idera.com, and that does come through to the sales managers, who will forward it on to people like Tim and myself to answer as well. So yeah, thanks for that, Tim. Yeah, so idera.com/contact sales, and our online documentation as well is all available with examples and tutorials out there also.
Okay, thank you, everybody.
Yeah, thanks everyone. Thanks, Tim.